Tilda Cavanaugh was 73 years old, and she had learned the hard way that a life doesn't end with a single crash. It empties out the way a creek dries in August. One missed payment, a funeral, a bad winter, a real estate man with a clipboard and a sentence she did not understand until it was already signed. By the morning of the Bramble County tax auction, she had $7 crumpled in the pocket of her late husband's barn coat, a rented upstairs room above a bait shop in Pinehollow, West Virginia, and a small brass key her father had mailed her 11 years ago that she still didn't know what to do with. She had no business raising her hand at that courthouse. 3 young men in expensive boots were already laughing when the auctioneer announced the final property. They were going to film her. They were going to put her face on the internet. And not one of them knew that the rusted log cabin going for the price of sandwich had been built, board by board, by her father's own hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years before that morning, Tilda had owned a small pottery studio on the back lot of her property outside Coldwater Bend. A 1940s farmhouse paid off the year Reagan left office, and a husband named Harlan who could still split firewood at 74. She had what people in that part of West Virginia call a quiet life. Steady, nothing flashy. Enough. Then Harlan had a stroke on a Tuesday in November, and he was gone before the ambulance made it to the county road. The funeral cost what funerals cost. The medical bills came in waves after, which she had not expected, because she had always assumed his union pension covered the catastrophic stuff. It did not. A lawyer in Charleston spent 40 minutes explaining why. She understood almost none of it, only the number at the bottom of the page. She sold the kiln in February. The smaller wheels and the glazed stock went in April. The truck Harlan had bought new in 1998 went a week later to a kid from up near Beckley who paid cash. The pottery studio sold in June to a younger woman from Pittsburgh who promised to keep it running and never did. By August, she had let the back acreage go. By Thanksgiving, the farmhouse itself, to a man named Ron Veach who wanted the land for a hunting lease. He let her stay through the winter as a courtesy. By the following spring, she was renting the upstairs room above Pinehollow bait and tackle from a woman she had known in church. The $7 in her pocket were what was left after the rent scam. She did not like thinking about it, but the facts were these. A man named Trent had come to her in late October with a partnership offer for a small commercial property he claimed he could flip. He had her sign things. She signed them. By the time she understood that the property in question was the one she had just signed her own name onto, he had taken the equity money and was somewhere in Tennessee. Or so the deputy said. The deputy was kind about it. He used the word fraud and the word elder twice in the same sentence. And then he had to leave because somebody had hit a deer on Route 19. She rode to the courthouse that morning with her sister-in-law's neighbor, a woman named Gail who was bidding on a duplex and didn't ask questions. Gail dropped her off at the steps at 8:15. The auction was already crowded. Most of the bidders were men in their 30s and 40s, dressed the way people dress when they want to look casual but expensive. There was a particular smell in the room. Coffee from the urn at the back. The cologne of the young flippers in the front row. The floor wax of an old county building. And underneath all of it the faint mildew of paperwork that had been sitting in the same drawers for 50 years. She found a seat 3 rows from the back. From there, she could see them clearly. 3 men in the front row, late 20s, one on his phone the whole time, one laughing at something on a laptop, one leaned back in his chair like he was at a sports bar. She would learn their names later. Brock Halloran, Spencer Vey, Reed Marston. At the time, she just thought of them as the loud ones. The auctioneer was a thick-set man named Wendell Trask, 50s, a gray ponytail under his cap, voice trained somewhere in the cattle barns of his younger life. He worked through the morning at a fast clip. A boarded-up house on Sycamore, a garage on the bypass, a trailer lot with no trailer. The loud ones bought 4 properties between them before noon. Brock Halloran clapped each time, like a kid at a baseball game. Tilda kept her hands folded in her lap. She had no business raising them yet. By 3 in the afternoon, most of the crowd had thinned. Wendell Trask was working through the last of the list, the leftovers nobody wanted, the ones the county was trying to shed before they had to pay a contractor to come tear them down. He sounded tired. The microphone kept popping. All right, folks, last one of the day. Lot 47. Property at 87 Hemlock Ridge Road, up off the old Bramble Pike. Log structure, approximately 1,200 square feet. No utilities, no septic, no road maintenance these past 10 years. Building inspectors listed it as condemned, pending demolition next quarter. County wants it gone before they're on the hook for the demo. Opening at $50. Silence. 25. Tilda's heart was doing something it had not done in 2 years. $10? Anyone? Come on, folks, take a chainsaw and a flatbed out there. The firewood alone covers your bid. She raised her hand. Wendell Trask looked up from his clipboard and squinted at the back of the room. He had not expected a hand. Nobody had. $10 to the lady in the brown coat. Do I have 15? Brock Halloran twisted around in his chair. Tilda saw him register her, take her in the way a man takes in something he is about to find funny. He nudged Spencer Vay beside him. Spencer turned. Then Reed Marston, slower than the other two. All three of them looking at her now. Ma'am, Wendell said, not unkindly, I have to ask. You understand the property's condemned. You're bidding on it as is, no recourse, no inspection contingencies. There's nothing the county can do for you if it falls down on top of somebody. I understand. All right then. $10 to the lady. Do I have 15 anywhere? The room stayed quiet. Brock Halloran was grinning openly now, his phone already out, screen turned toward her. Spencer had his out too. Going once at 10. She would have liked to leave it at 10. The truth was she did not have 10. She had 7. She had taken the 7 out of the barn coat pocket on the courthouse steps and counted them twice, 2 ones and a 5, and the 5 was so creased it looked like fabric. Hold on, sir, she said. Her voice was thinner than she wanted it to be. I could do 7. Brock Halloran laughed out loud. It was the kind of laugh that wanted attention and got it. Spencer joined in a half-second later. Reed was filming. Wendell Trask paused. He looked at her for a long moment over the top of his reading glasses. Then he looked at the clipboard. Then at her again. $7, he said. All right. Authorized to clear the books. $7 from the lady in the back, going once, going twice. He brought the gavel down lightly, almost apologetically. Sold. Lot 47, 87 Hemlock Ridge Road. To bidder number, ma'am. What's your number? 31. 31. Come on up to the table, please. She stood up. Her knees were not what they used to be, and the room had been sitting for a long time. She walked the length of that center aisle with everyone watching, and the 3 men in the front row turned their bodies to track her, and Brock Halloran's phone never came down once. Ma'am, he said, loud enough to carry, you sure you want to spend your grocery money on a pile of rotten logs? My grandma did something like this, right before they took her keys away. Spencer laughed so hard he made a noise. Tilda did not stop walking. She did not look at them. She got to the clerk's table and put her $7 down on the wood. The 2 ones and the soft 5. The clerk, a heavy woman in her 40s with a kind face and tired eyes, counted them without expression and slid a receipt across. Sign here, ma'am, and here, and here. Tilda signed. The pen barely worked. The clerk handed her a thin manila folder with a deed copy and a yellow tax stub stapled inside. You're the legal owner of record as of this signature. Good luck. Thank you. She turned to walk out. Brock Halloran stood up in her path. He was not blocking her exactly. He was standing in the aisle the way a man stands when he wants to perform. Ma'am, real quick, can I ask, what's your plan with that cabin? Honestly, I'm curious. You gonna live there? You gonna fix it up? She looked at him. None of your business, son. It came out flat with no heat in it. That was somehow worse for him than if she had been angry. The grin faltered for a second. Spencer caught it on his phone. Whoa, Reed said low, half laughing. She got you. Brock recovered. I'm just saying, ma'am, for your safety, that building's not structurally sound. The inspector said. I heard the inspector, she said. Excuse me. She walked around him. He let her. The 3 of them followed her with their cameras all the way to the courthouse door, narrating into them as they went, and she heard Brock say the words grocery money twice more before she made it down the front steps to the sidewalk where Gail was waiting in her Buick. Gail did not ask. She had been in enough auctions to know when not to. The drive to Lorraine's place in Coldwater Bend was 46 minutes. Tilda did not say anything until they crossed the river. Then she said, "Thank you, Gail. Don't mention it, honey." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lorraine's house sat back from the road behind a row of pin oaks Howard had planted in 1983. The porch light was on, though. It was barely 4 in the afternoon. Howard was in the front yard raking. He waved to Gail. He did not wave to Tilda. Lorraine came out onto the porch as Gail's Buick pulled away. "Well," Lorraine said. "How bad?" Tilda climbed the porch steps. She handed her sister the manila folder without a word. Lorraine opened it. She read the deed copy. She read the tax stub. She read again. Her face moved through 4 things in about 6 seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then something close to fear, then the thing Tilda had been waiting for. "Tilda, tell me you did not just spend your last dollars on a condemned shack out by Hemlock Ridge." "I spent 7 of them." "Tilda." "Lorraine." Howard had stopped raking. He was leaning on the rake handle now, watching the porch the way men watch a thing they don't want to be part of. Lorraine pressed the folder against her chest like she could hide it from her own eyes. "Come inside," she said. "We need to talk. The 3 of us." Lorraine's kitchen had not changed in 30 years. Same yellow curtains. Same Formica table with the gold flecks. Same wall clock with the rooster on the face, ticking too loud for a quiet room. Howard came in last and closed the back door behind him with more care than the door required. He did not sit down. He stood at the counter with his arms crossed. Lorraine put the manila folder on the table between them. She did not open it again. She did not need to. "Tilda, I want you to listen to me. I'm not angry. I am scared. I know you are. Do you?" Lorraine sat down across from her. "Because the woman I drove home from Harlan's funeral 3 years ago would not have walked into a courthouse and given $7 to a man for a building she has never seen. That woman was careful. That woman read every paper twice before she signed it. That woman trusted a man named Trent. Don't do that. Don't deflect. The Trent thing is exactly why we are sitting here having this conversation." Howard cleared his throat. He had a way of doing it that meant he was about to say something he had been waiting to say for a while. "Lorraine and I have been talking," he said, "about Sunny Glen." Sunny Glen was the assisted living place out past the Lutheran church. Tilda had driven past the sign maybe 200 times in her life and never once looked twice at it. "I'm not going to Sunny Glen." "Tilda, just listen. I'm not going to Sunny Glen." "Howard, it's not what you think. They have apartments. Independent units. You'd have your own kitchen. We toured one last month. You toured one." For information, Tilda looked at her sister. Lorraine did not meet her eyes. The rooster clock ticked. Somewhere in the house, the furnace kicked on. "Lorraine," Tilda said, "do you remember what Daddy mailed me in 2014? Lorraine's head came up. The question caught her off guard. "A letter. He mailed you a letter that summer. You showed it to me at Christmas. And what else?" "A key. A little brass key. You wear on your ring. You've worn it on your ring for 10 years. I never asked what it was for because you said you didn't know. I still don't know exactly. But I know who built that cabin out on Hemlock Ridge." Lorraine went very still. "Daddy spent the last 6 years of his life out there on weekends," Tilda said. "You remember, after Mama died, he'd disappear Friday afternoons and come back Sunday nights smelling like wood smoke and pine sap. You used to tease him about a girlfriend." "I remember. There was no girlfriend. He was building something. He told me once, just once, on the porch the spring before he died. He said, 'Tildy, I am putting together a place up at Hemlock Ridge. When you are ready, it will be ready for you.' That was all he said. I asked him what he meant. He said, 'You'll know when you know.'" Howard had uncrossed his arms. "In the letter he mailed me right before he passed," Tilda went on, "he wrote that he had set the property up in a trust. He didn't give me the address. He said his lawyer would handle the rest. He sent me the key. He said hang on to it. Then he died 11 days later in that hospital in Charleston. And the lawyer Daddy used was a man named Phil Boucher. And Phil Boucher had a heart attack on a golf course in 2016, and his practice got absorbed by some firm in Wheeling, and every paper I ever signed about Daddy's estate was about the house and the truck and the savings account. Nobody ever mentioned a cabin." "Tilda, I forgot about it, Lorraine. I forgot about a cabin. Harlan got sick. The pottery studio went under. Trent took the rest. The key just hung on my ring. I would touch it sometimes and think, what was that? What was Daddy talking about? And then last week I was reading the auction list at the library because Gail asked me to look at the duplex listing for her. And there it was. 87 Hemlock Ridge Road. Bramble County tax default. 1,200 square feet. Log construction. Lorraine put both hands flat on the Formica table. Why would Daddy let the county take it? He didn't on purpose. Phil Boucher died. The trust wasn't refiled. The taxes weren't paid because nobody at the new firm knew the property existed. It sat there for 10 years drawing penalty interest until the county finally moved on it. It came up at auction yesterday. I read about it last night. And you didn't call me. You would have stopped me, Lorraine. Howard finally sat down at the table. Tilda, he said, slow, you were telling us that the cabin you just bought for $7 is one your father built. With his own hands. Yes, Howard. And you have a key that may fit the lock on the door. Yes. The rooster clock ticked. Lorraine reached across the table and laid her hand on top of Tilda's. Tomorrow morning, she said. We're going up there. The three of us. Together. No, Tilda said. Tomorrow morning, I am going up there alone. If it's what I think it is, I will call you from the road. If it isn't, I will come back here and you can take me to Sunny Glen yourself. Lorraine opened her mouth to argue, and then she closed it. 1 week, she said finally. You said 1 week. 1 week. She left Lorraine's at 6 the next morning with a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, a pair of work gloves Howard had pushed into her hands without comment, and the manila folder on the passenger seat of Harlan's old Bronco. The Bronco was a 2002, white once, more of a chalk color now, and it ran the way old trucks run when somebody has loved them. She had not driven it more than 30 miles in 8 months. Hemlock Ridge Road branched off the old Bramble Pike about 4 miles past the river. She remembered the pike from childhood. Her father had taken her up there in his work truck a few times when she was small, before he had stopped going for reasons nobody in the family ever explained. The pike was paved still, barely. Hemlock Ridge Road was not. It was a single-lane gravel cut that climbed at about a 6% grade through second-growth oak and chestnut, with a culvert at the bottom that the Bronco had to take in low gear. The county had not maintained any of it in a decade. Branches scraped both sides of the truck. She came around a third switchback, and the road opened into a clearing of maybe an acre. Pine duff and last year's leaves underfoot. A stone wall, low, only knee-height, ran along the far edge. And, set back from the wall, in the middle of the clearing, was the cabin. She stopped the Bronco in the middle of the road and just sat there. It was smaller than she had pictured. 1,200 square feet was not large. The roof was green-black with moss, and one corner of the front porch had pulled away from the main beam, sagging maybe 4 inches. The chimney was river stone, field work, the kind of man stacks himself over a summer. 2 windows on the front face. A door of solid plank with iron strap hinges. But the logs. The logs were what stopped her breathing for a moment. They were hand-hewn, square-cut, not round. Dovetailed at the corners with the tight, half-blind joinery her father had taught her brother to do one summer when they were teenagers. The summer her brother quit halfway through and her father had finished the workbench alone in the garage. She knew that joint. She had watched her father lay it out 1,000 times with a framing square and a pencil stub. The cabin had been built by Tilda Cavanaugh. There was no question. She got out of the truck. The air up there was different from the valley. Thinner. It smelled like cold pine and wet stone and something faintly wood-smoky that should not have been there, because nothing had been burned in that clearing in 10 years. She walked the perimeter first. The back of the cabin was set against a slope of laurel. A small spring ran out from under a flat rock about 30 feet behind the structure and down into a shallow trough Otto had cut into the bedrock. A spring. He had built it over a spring. Her chest did something painful and small. She came back around to the front. The porch boards looked unsafe. She tested the first one with her weight before she stepped up. It held. The second held. She made it to the door. The lock was a mortise lock, brass, recessed into the door at hip height. Old style. The kind her father had restored as a hobby in his last years, picking up retired ones at estate sales and rebuilding the tumblers at his bench. She knew this lock. He had shown her one like it. She unhooked the keyring for her coat pocket and slid the little brass key off it. The key fit. The key turned. She stood there for a second with her hand on the doorknob. Her ears were full of her own pulse. The door opened inward without a sound. Whoever had hung it true. The interior was darker than she had expected because the windows were grimed and the trees outside had grown up close to the south wall. She stepped in. The air inside was dry. Not musty. Dry the way a well-built, sealed space stays dry. She clicked on Howard's flashlight. The beam caught a room. Plank floor, broadboards, sanded smooth. A built-in bench along the far wall with a hinged seat. A small kitchen counter with a hand pump for the spring. A cast-iron stove in the corner, capped and clean. And dominating the whole room, the Riverstone fireplace, floor to ceiling, taking up most of the east wall. She stood in the middle of the room and turned a slow circle. There was no furniture beyond the bench. No personal items. No clothes. No photographs. The cabin was finished but empty. Whoever had built it had stopped just before moving in. She had been inside maybe 4 minutes when she heard tires on the gravel. She came back out onto the porch. A Bramble County sheriff's truck was idling at the edge of the clearing. The deputy who climbed out was young, maybe 30, with a buzz cut and a politeness that looked practiced. "Ma'am, good morning. Deputy Tomas Wexley. I got a call from the county clerk's office that somebody had cleared lot 47. I just need to confirm a few things." She held up the manila folder. "Bought it yesterday afternoon. $7. I have the deed." He came up the path slowly. He took the folder. He read it through. He read it through twice. He looked up at the cabin behind her, then at her, then back at the deed. "Ma'am," he said, "you mind telling me what you're planning to do here?" "Deputy, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure yet. My father built this cabin. I only just learned that yesterday." Deputy Wexley closed the folder. He handed it back. He looked at the dovetailed corners of the cabin for a long moment. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I can see that he did." Deputy Wexley stayed another 15 minutes. He walked the cabin's exterior with her. He made her promise she would not sleep there until she got somebody to look at the porch beam. He gave her his cell number on the back of a county business card and told her to call if anything came up. Then he climbed back into his truck and rolled down the window before he left. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, my granddad was a Finnish carpenter out of Lewisburg. I know a hand-hewn corner when I see one. Whatever your father was, he was a serious man. He was deputy. Thank you." She watched the truck disappear back down the switchbacks. The clearing went quiet again. The kind of quiet that has wind in it, but no human sound at all. She went back inside. She sat down on the built-in bench along the far wall and let her eyes adjust. There was no need to rush. The cabin was hers. Whatever was here had been waiting 11 years. It could wait another hour. The fireplace was the thing she kept coming back to. It was too big for the room. That was the first thought. A cabin of 1,200 square feet did not need a chimney that wide. Her father had built fireplaces before. The one at the old farmhouse, the one at her aunt's place in Lewisburg. He had a sense of proportion. This one violated it. She got up and walked to the hearth. The stones were river rock, rounded, the kind you pull out of the greenbrier in shallow water. He had set them in mortar with the wide faces out. Most fieldstone fireplaces, the mason mixes the stone sizes for visual rhythm. Otto had done that too, but she noticed, standing close, that one vertical course about chest-high on the right-hand side of the firebox had stones of more uniform size than the rest. 6 stones almost matched. The mortar between them looked the same age as the rest, but the joints were slightly tighter. She ran her fingers along the joints. The 3rd stone from the bottom of that course was warmer to the touch than the others. Not by much, just enough that her hand stopped on it. She knelt down with the flashlight. She put the beam right up against the stone. On the lower left edge of the stone, almost invisible unless you knew to look, somebody had carved a small symbol. An acorn. The cap and the nut, no bigger than a thumbnail. Otto Cavanaugh's maker's mark. He had carved it into the underside of every clock he ever built. She had a mantel clock at Lorraine's house with the same acorn on the bottom plate. She stood up too fast, and the room tilted. She braced herself against the mantel. "Daddy," she said out loud. The word came out before she thought about it. She went out to the Bronco and got the work gloves and a flathead screwdriver from the toolbox Harlan had kept under the back seat for 20 years. She came back in and knelt at the fireplace again. The screwdriver slid into the joint above the acorn stone almost easily. She worked it back and forth. The mortar was real, but thin, the way you'd point a stone you intended to remove later. She worked the joint on the left side, then the right, then the top. The stone came out into her hand. It weighed less than she expected. The back of it had been hollowed and capped, so that the front face looked like solid river rock, but the actual stone was a thin shell, maybe 1.5 inches thick. Her father had done this on purpose. He had done it years before she was ready to find it. She set the stone on the hearth. The cavity behind it went deeper than her flashlight beam could reach. She lay down on the cold hearthstones and aimed the light straight in. Maybe 2 feet back, set into the chimney's interior brick lining, was a small steel door. Painted matte black, hinged on the right side, a combination dial in the center. A floor safe set sideways into the chimney mass. The kind you buy from a locksmith in the 1970s. She lay there for a long time looking at it. Eventually, she pushed up on her knees and reached in. The cavity was shallow enough that she could get her arm to the safe door without much trouble. She brushed dust off the dial. The numbers were still legible, 0 through 99. 3 turns to set. She tried her own birth date first. 8/27/52. The dial moved smoothly under her fingers, the way a well-maintained safe will move 40 years after it was made. She landed on 52 and pulled the handle. It clicked. The door swung open about 1 inch on its own weight. She did not move for maybe 30 seconds. She just sat there on the hearthstones with one hand on the open safe door and the other flat against her chest. Then she opened it the rest of the way and reached inside. The first thing her hand found was paper. Oilcloth-wrapped bundles, 3 of them, soft at the edges where the cloth had been folded and refolded. She brought them out one at a time and set them on the hearth beside the stone, heavier than they looked. Behind the bundles, deeper in the safe, her fingers touched leather. A bound journal. She pulled it out. The cover was plain dark calfskin, no title, no marking. And behind the journal, propped upright against the back wall of the safe, was a sealed envelope. Cream paper. Her name written across the front in her father's handwriting. Tildy. Just that. The name only he had ever called her. She sat down on the floor with her back against the cool stones of the fireplace and held the envelope in her lap with both hands and did not open it for a long time. She opened the envelope with her thumbnail. The seal was wax, brittle with age, and it gave easily. Inside were 4 sheets of cream, stationery folded once. The handwriting was Otto's, the same hand that had labeled every drawer in his workshop, the same hand that had signed her birthday cards for 58 years. Tildy, if you're reading this, then you found the cabin and the lock, and you remembered what a maker's mark looks like. That is more than I dared hope for. I wrote this letter in March of 2014, 3 weeks before they told me about the cancer. By the time you read it, I will have been gone a long while. I built this place for you. I started in 2008, the spring after your mother passed. Well, I could not stand to be in the house on weekends anymore. I bought the 4 acres from a man named Ed Yarborough for $6,000 cash. I built the cabin myself, every board, every joint. I am proud of the dovetails. Your brother started to learn them once and quit, but I think you would have finished them if you had been a boy. Maybe that is a thing I should have said when you were younger. She had to stop reading. She put the letter down on the hearth and wiped her face on the sleeve of the barn coat and picked the letter up again. The cabin is not the real gift. The cabin is the box the gift came in. Behind the stone you pulled, you will have found 3 oilcloth bundles, a journal, and this letter. Open the bundles before you read the journal. You will understand faster that way. She set the letter aside and reached for the first bundle. Inside the first oilcloth was a stack of yellowed engineering drawings, hand-drawn on linen vellum, signed and dated in the lower right corner of each sheet. Tilda Cavanaugh, May 1971, June 1971, August 1971, through to February 1973. 23 drawings in all. They showed, in increasingly refined detail, the internal mechanism of a clock escapement. The escape wheel, the pallet fork, a verge geometry she did not fully understand but recognized as something she had seen her father work on at his bench when she was a teenager. The second bundle held the prototype itself, a small brass and steel mechanism, no bigger than a deck of cards, wrapped in soft cloth and packed in a fitted wooden box. The label on the box read, in Otto's hand, Isochronous Escapement Prototype 4. Working. Cavanaugh, 1973. The third bundle was the heaviest. She unfolded the oilcloth slowly. Inside were 2 manila folders, a stack of bearer bonds bound with rubber bands that had gone hard with age, and a velvet roll. The velvet roll contained gold coins. She did not count them. She could see 20 just on the top layer. She picked the letter back up. The drawings in the prototype are the original work I submitted to the United States Patent Office in March of 1973. The application number was 3,742,891. The application was rejected 8 months later, in November, on the grounds that prior art had been filed for a substantially similar mechanism by Garrick Watch Company of Connecticut. I was 31 years old. I had spent 4 years on that escapement. I did not have the money to fight it. 14 months after my application was rejected, Tilda, Garrick Watch Company filed United States Patent 3,889,447 for what they call the atomic anchor escapement. The drawings in their filing are not similar to mine. They are mine. They are traced from sheets that were in my possession the day I walked into the patent office in Washington. Somebody inside that office passed my drawings to somebody inside that company. I do not know who. I never found out. I tried for 2 years through a lawyer in Charleston who charged me what we could not afford and got me nowhere. The atomic anchor mechanism is in every Garrick wristwatch sold since 1976. Their revenue from that line alone, last time I cared to look, was over $800 million. She set the letter down again. Her hand was shaking now. The folders contain everything you need. Sworn affidavits from 2 engineers who saw my prototype in 1972 before Garrick's filing. Notarized statements. Receipts for brass and tool steel dated 1971 and 1972. My own bench notes. The bonds and the coins are 40 years of savings I never spent because I always thought I might need them to fight this in court. I leave them to you to use as you see fit. If you choose not to fight, use the money to live. Either choice is the right choice. The lawyer to call is Delphine Marwick in Pinehollow. I met her at a county fair 8 years ago and watched her argue with a livestock judge for 20 minutes about the rules of the brown Swiss class. She did not back down. She did not raise her voice. She won. I asked around about her after that. She is honest and she is sharp. She does not know about any of this. Tell her your father sent you. I love you, Tilda. I always did. You're old man. She folded the letter back into thirds. She put it inside her coat against her chest. She sat there a while. Then she stood up, gathered the 3 bundles and the journal carefully into the empty toolbox from the Bronco, replaced the hollow stone in the cavity. She would seat it properly later, locked the cabin door behind her with the little brass key, and drove down Hemlock Ridge Road faster than she had driven anything in 20 years. Delphine Marwick's office was above the Pinehollow drugstore. The receptionist looked up when Tilda walked in. I need to see Ms. Marwick. My father sent me. His name was Otto Cavanaugh. Delphine Marwick was 41, dark-haired, in a gray suit that had been pressed, but not recently. She came out of her office holding a coffee cup. She looked Tilda up and down, took in the toolbox under Tilda's arm, and said, "Ms. Cavanaugh, come back." They sat in a room with 2 windows that looked down on the main street of Pinehollow. Tilda put the toolbox on the desk and opened it. She handed Delphine the letter first. Delphine read it through twice. The second time she read it, her free hand went to the side of her face and stayed there. "Mrs. Cavanaugh, Tilda is fine. Tilda, do you understand what your father is alleging in this letter?" "I think so. He says they stole his patent. He says the proof is in these bundles. He is alleging a federal patent crime by a publicly traded watch corporation, with contemporaneous documentary evidence and a working prototype dated before their filing." Delphine put the coffee down. "Has anyone else seen any of this?" "My sister knows the cabin exists. Nobody has seen what was in it. Only you." "Good. Keep it that way for now. I'm going to make some phone calls." The phone calls took 11 days. The first one Delphine made was to a man named Dr. Arden Pruitt at the University of Maryland. Pruitt was 68, recently retired from teaching, and had spent his career on horology and the history of American patent disputes. He drove down on a Saturday in a Subaru station wagon with a pair of magnifying loupes and a microscope kit and a hard case in the back. He spent 2 days at Delphine's conference table examining the drawings and the prototype. On the second afternoon, he set the loupe down and looked at Tilda over the top of his reading glasses. "Mrs. Cavanaugh, I want to be careful with what I say. The drawings in your father's possession are dated May 1971 through February 1973. The paper is consistent. The ink is consistent. The signatures match. The prototype shows tool marks consistent with hand fabrication in a small shop, and the brass shows oxidation consistent with the dating. None of that is conclusive on its own. The conclusive piece is this." He turned one of the original drawings sideways under the lamp. "Your father added a small geometric correction to the palette fork angle in this sheet, dated November of 1972. It is a 14-degree adjustment. It corrects an oscillation problem that any working watchmaker would have run into on the bench. Garrick's 1974 patent filing contains the same 14-degree adjustment in the same location, drawn in what appears to be the same hand trace line. They did not figure out that correction independently. They copied it off your father's sheet. There is no other explanation for the specific angle." Delphine wrote down everything Pruitt said. The bonds and the gold coins were sent to an appraiser in Charleston the following week. They came back valued at $341,000, give or take. Tilda did not touch any of it. She told Delphine to put it in a holding account. The intent to litigate was filed in federal court in the Southern District of New York on a Tuesday morning in February. The complaint named Garrick Watch Company, listed Tilda Cavanaugh as the original inventor of the isochronous escapement, and sought damages for 41 years of unlicensed commercial use of the patented mechanism. The number Delphine put on the complaint was $22 million. The story leaked the following weekend. A reporter at the Charleston Gazette-Mail found the filing in the court database and called Delphine. Delphine called Tilda. Tilda said she did not want her face on television. Delphine said that was a choice she could make. The reporter ran the story anyway, with the public court documents and a photograph of the cabin pulled from a county assessor's website. The headline read, "West Virginia widow bought late father's cabin for $7 at tax auction, finds patent evidence against Garrick Watch Company." The Associated Press picked it up by Wednesday. CBS Sunday Morning called. So did 3 documentary producers. And somebody on the internet found a video. Brock Halloran had posted the courthouse footage to his real estate flipping account back in November. It had about 200 views and a caption that read, "Grandma spent her last $7 on a condemned shed, LOL." By Friday of the week, the AP story broke. That video had 19 million views, and the comment section was a wall of fire. His company, a flipping LLC out of Charleston called Halloran Holdings, lost its 3 biggest investor relationships in 8 days. Spencer Vey deleted his account. Reed Marston posted a long apology that nobody believed and then deleted it too. Brock himself went quiet for a month. Garrick Watch Company's first response was a corporate statement denying all allegations. Their second response, for months later, was a settlement offer. Delphine called Tilda at Lorraine's house on a Wednesday in June. They want to settle. They are offering $3 million and a quiet acknowledgement in a press release. What do you think? I think we go back at them for 10 and posthumous attribution in the patent record. The attribution matters more than the money. Your father's name on that filing matters more than any check. Then ask for that. The final settlement came through on a Thursday in late August. $4.8 million. Posthumous attribution to Tilda Cavanaugh in the United States Patent Office records as co-inventor of the atomic anchor escapement. A statement of regret from Garrick's board, brief, lawyered, but printed. Delphine read the settlement letter to her over the phone. Tilda set the receiver down on Lorraine's kitchen table and went out onto the porch and sat on the top step and cried in a way she had not cried since the morning of Harlan's funeral. 14 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, the clearing at the top of Hemlock Ridge Road looked like a different place. The road itself was the first thing that had changed. Tilda had paid the county to grade and gravel it properly that spring, and a small crew had widened the second switchback so a delivery truck could make the turn. The porch beam had been rebuilt. The roof had been stripped of moss and re-shingled in cedar. The two windows on the front face were new, double-paned, set into the original openings Otto had cut. The chimney and the dovetailed corners of the cabin had not been touched. Tilda had been firm about that with the contractor. Behind the original cabin, a second structure had gone up over the summer. A long single-story workshop, 1,800 square feet, built in the same hand-hewn style by a crew out of Lewisburg who had done historical restoration on 3 state park buildings. The workshop had 4 benches, good north light, a small kitchen, a wood stove, a wall of tool storage Tilda had laid out herself. The sign over the workshop door read, in plain, routed letters, "The Hearthstone Fellowship." Below that, smaller, "For elder craftspeople. Applications by referral." The opening was scheduled for 11 that morning. Tilda was on the porch of the original cabin at 7, drinking coffee from a thermos, in a heavier coat than she had worn the November before because the wind off the ridge had teeth this time of year. Lorraine arrived at 8:30 with a pan of cornbread and Howard behind her carrying 2 folding tables. Lorraine had been at the cabin almost every weekend since June, helping with the workshop fit-out. She had apologized to Tilda formally, once, on the porch of her own house, the morning after the AP story broke. She had cried doing it. Tilda had told her there was nothing to forgive, which was not entirely true, but it was close enough. The first fellows arrived at 10. There were 6 of them in the inaugural cohort. A retired clockmaker named Augustin from up near Wheeling, 79, whose hands still worked perfectly fine, but whose grandson had told him to quit messing with the watches. "Grandpa, you're going to lose a finger." A woodturner named Mrs. Pell from Roanoke, 81, who had been a high school shop teacher for 35 years and had not been inside a workshop since she retired in 2009. A bookbinder from Charleston named Roy, who was the youngest of the 6 at 68. 2 sisters from Pocahontas County who made traditional split oak baskets the way their grandmother had taught them in 1953. And a retired machinist named Mr. Akiyama who had emailed Delphine in February with a one-line message that read, "I read about your client. I have things I would like to make before I die. Please consider me." The fellowship covered their materials, their lodging in a small set of cabins Tilda had built on the lower slope, and a modest stipend. Applications were by referral only. There would be 8 fellows the next year, and 8 the year after that, for as long as the endowment from the settlement could sustain it. Delphine had set the structure up so that the principal stayed invested and only the yield was spent. If Tilda was careful, the fellowship could run for 60 years. The opening was small, maybe 40 people. The county commissioner came. Deputy Wexley came in plain clothes, with his wife and his 6-year-old daughter, who wandered straight into the workshop and put both hands on the woodturner's lathe before her mother caught her. Wendell Trask, the auctioneer, came. He had retired in June, and he stood in the back of the workshop with a coffee and did not say much. Dr. Arden Pruitt drove down from Maryland. Brock Halloran did not come. He had sent a letter in August. It had arrived on a Tuesday, handwritten on plain white paper for pages. Tilda had read it once, slowly, on the porch. He had not asked for forgiveness. He had described, in plain words, what he had done at the auction, what he had said in the parking lot, what he had posted online, and what he had learned in the years since. He said he was not the same person. He said he hoped that was true. He had enclosed a check for $10,000 made out to the Hearthstone Fellowship. Tilda had cashed the check. She had written him back a single line on a postcard. "Mistakes can teach. The fellowship thanks you. T. Cavanaugh." She had framed his letter and her postcard reply side by side and hung them in the entryway of the workshop, near the door, where everyone walking in would pass them. Above the fireplace in the original cabin, on the mantel her father had cut from a single beam of chestnut, she had hung a small framed photograph. Otto Cavanaugh in 1972 at his bench in the garage of the old farmhouse. Glasses pushed up on his forehead, a loop in one hand, a half-finished escapement in the other. The plaque under the photograph read, "Otto Cavanaugh, 1932 to 2014. He built this for me before I knew I needed it. At 11 that morning, on the porch of the workshop, with the 6 fellows and her sister and her brother-in-law and the deputy's daughter and Wendell Trask and Dr. Pruitt and Delphine Marwick and the county commissioner and a small crowd of neighbors gathered in the clearing. Tilda Cavanaugh stood with both her hands in the pockets of her coat and said the only thing she could think of to say. My father waited a long time for somebody to find what he hid behind the fireplace. I want to thank every one of you for being the people he was waiting for. The wind moved through the chestnut oaks on the ridge. Mrs. Pell, 81 years old, walked in the workshop and turned on the lathe. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.